A mother throws a newborn baby into a dumpster because the truth will destroy everything you touch in you. The hospital hallway was dead silent. Just the hum of machines, the distant wail of another mother's newborn. But Ailey Jones? She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was just staring. Her shaking hands, the faded Ankara wrapper clinging to her sweat-soaked skin, the incubator lights flickering over her baby's tiny body. And then, she did the unthinkable. Why? Keep watching to see the results of her choice. The halogen lights hanging from the walls of Ailey's words seemed to be casting mocking rays on her rather slumpy body. She lay on the bed with her Ankara wrapped around her sweaty body as she looked at the bill given to her. Total bill, 2.98 million naira. Across Ailey's ward, her mother Barbara could be seen barely alive as she was on dialysis. From afar, Barbara's yellow hospital gown could reveal her swollen extremities, even up to her face. Ailey's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the nurse's movement towards her.
Ma'am, I was told to inform you that if any payment is not made before 6 a.m. tomorrow, Mrs. Barbara's dialysis will be discontinued,
the nurse said, as if she were rehearsing her speech. The buzz from Ailey's phone shifted her attention to one of her last options. The message that came read, "Quick credit loan denied." The second message was the reply she got from her ex-boyfriend, who is now flashing stacks on Instagram in his newly purchased Ashake concert outfit. Ailey had earlier sent him a message seeking financial help after he had hung up on her, and his reply reads,
"The child was never mine. Please let me be."
Among the wails of patients and the struggle for survival around the four corners of the hospital stood a frail-looking, observant cleaner who had been watching Ailey for a while now. From a distance, he could see that she had been sobbing, which looked like a perfect time for him to step in.
"I am so sorry that you are going through all this,"
he said, with compassion while he moved an inch closer to her bed.
"I wish I could help, but I have heard people say that they get the money they need when they drop their burdens or the savage landfill,"
he continued in a much lower tone. "My burdens? As in?" Ailey sniffed and looked up interestedly.
"They said they care for your child while you are settled heavily with money. That is what I have seen most women in your situation do,"
he answered with optimism.
"If you want to give it a thought, then start with this,"
he concluded while slipping a slightly blood-stained money bag labeled Dream Bank. Ailey hesitated, then thought of her mother, whose breath grew shallower by the minute. She gave in after realizing she had run out of options. She waited until her baby, Grace, was moved out of the incubator into her crib. As early as 5 a.m. one fateful morning, she smuggled herself and Grace out of the hospital with the help of the cleaner and headed for the Savage landfill. At Savage landfill, the stench of rotting fish and lobsters from big boys' parties and the burnt hospital waste hit Ailey as she stumbled through the trash that rainy morning. Ailey's baby, Grace, popped her tiny hands from the coarse, dry material of the package given to her, a Dream Bank branded money sack. Grace's wrapped clothing tore through her delicate, light skin, which she whimpered at and blindly brushed through the tattoo on Ailey's hands. The Japa or Die inscription on Ailey's wrist was the indulgence of the oath she had to take before standing there. "Baby, I am so sorry. I am truly sorry," she said with a broken voice of a deep wail. She reached the point where she was instructed to drop her and lower the sack into the rotten baggage. Little Grace moved restlessly in her little cage, and unfortunately, her whimpers became fainter because of the muffling in the fabric. At that point, she wanted to hesitate, but the cleaner's words rang in her ears again.
Drop your burdens and money will follow you.
With the last sense of regret, she lowered her baby in the supposed drop point and heard the sack hit a broken dialysis, and the Savage Medical logo on it was glaring at her even in the dark. She left the drop point in tears, but her phone vibrated before she could get to the landfill's entrance.
Credit alert, 5 million naira.
Hailey was back at the hospital without the baby and could be seen discussing with the cashier. Her phone buzzed again with a credit alert of 4.6 million naira from Dream Bank. The sight of this sent shivers down her spine. It was more than the exact amount she needed to foot the bills. She remembered the cleaner's last words.
Money will find you.
She showed them the cashier 5 million deposit. She told the doctors to finish her mother's treatment, but the money had arrived 11 minutes too late. Hailey collapsed on the floor outside the gate, her face buried in the dirt. Why, God? Why give me a miracle too late? She cried out. Why save one and take the other? A security guard handed her a plastic bottle of water and whispered,
Madam, they say it is not a miracle. They say you killed your baby for a ritual.
The guilt was more than she could take. That evening, she returned to the drop point at the Savage landfill, but found only Gracie's socks. The sack was gone, with no trace of it around. The only two things left behind were the orderly cleared area where she dropped Grace and the next text that reads, "You have 9.6 million naira. You can be faster next time." Dr. Charles is a renowned surgeon who took up the charitable habit of scavenging nearby hospital landfills in search of reusable supplies. The healthcare system has been neglected for the past few years, and medical supplies have been hindering the operation of some hospital units. Patients have died because there were limited supplies for their treatment, and sorting useful medical waste that could be sterilized was the only way Dr. Charles could help in such a time. His hands had performed wonders in operating rooms across 3 continents when complicated surgeries were needed. But those same fingers, still steady despite the exhaustion, shifted through bloodied gauze and shattered vials, hunting for salvageable scraps. The odor from the waste comforted him all through his stay scavenging, and the wind was not helping either. After digging through a good amount of waste and picking some quite valuable supplies, he heard a sound that was not common in waste areas. It was a whimper, but it was not from rats or the usual kids routinely searching the dump for scrap metals. It was the weak cry of a newborn, clear and soft. This was strange. Charles swung up almost immediately, and the wind brought the sound to his ears. Somewhere in this mountain, filled with lost hopes and reminders of pain, something or even someone was alive. He approached the sound, and to his utmost shock, he pulled up a blood-stained fabric that looked precisely like a Dream Bank money sack, and saw the baby inside it. Alas, he found a baby, and she was alive. The baby's tiny hands popped out almost as he picked her up. She was clutching a crumpled hospital invoice with a familiar barcode. In her other fist, her lips turned black from landfill fumes, but her eyes were bright, alert, burning with a will to live. Charles picked her up with his scavenging tools and ran to a once ambulance that he turned into his scrap vehicle. On his way, the baby vomited black fluids on his scavenging clothes, but that was less of a concern because he needed to make sure she was stabilized and taking in clean air to avoid her lungs collapsing. After Dr. Charles cleaned her up, he went straight to an orphanage close to where he lived and left her under their care while he went through the legal adoption process of the baby. After the process, he was legally allowed to be the baby's guardian, and that was how she would become his daughter. She was named Adanna, which means father's daughter. Dr. Charles discarded the sack he found her with, but kept the fabric bearing the dream logo, which would become our first written words later. The dim fluorescent light in Dr. Charles's small home clinic cast rays on the hallway, whose walls were covered with old election posters and an already scratched Sacred Heart sticker. 7-year-old Adanna was relaxed on a wooden bench as she swung her legs in thin hair, still short of reaching the floor.
Dad!
She echoed across to Charles as she picked at the antiseptic label stuck on her knees.
My mama, was she a bad person?
She asked, with a severe glare at Dr. Charles. The whole doctor nearly injured himself out of shock with the syringe he was sterilizing.
Ha! Nah. But what made you think so?
He said, trying to force a smile.
She's just another mother the world made desperate for you.
But Adanna's eye remained fixed on him as he responded to her. Under Dr. Charles's threadbare agbada, his sweat was already cold. The truth she sought lay 3 feet away, locked in his rusty Ghana must go filing cabinet, and that made him sick even more. After answering Adanna, he looked away and pointed to the savage medical logo embedded in the cover of a cartoon.
That is the bad guy over there, not your mama.
16 years later, at Revival Medical Archives, 2 a.m., a 23-year-old resident doctor, Dr. Adanna, also known as Grace, walked in and headed to her office in Emerald Hospital one hot afternoon. She slumped on her seat after an exhaustive 5-hour ward round, but she was finally in her comfort zone, enjoying the cooling effect of the office's AC. For the past few weeks, she had been receiving lots of tips about how various hospitals were involved in trafficking children, and as a radical, she was not taking it lightly. After some rest, she changed into more comfortable clothes and headed to the hospital archives, where she had gotten busy for the past few days. But today, luck was on her side, as the first set of files she searched contained a patient's file under a familiar name, Barbara Jones, 2005. She opened the file and the following details intrigued her even more. Next of kin, daughter, Hailey Ho. Contact, St. Balogun Market. Her heart began to pound at the sight of the name Hailey. Could this be the person she has been looking for? Earlier investigations showed that her date of birth matched with the same day a woman reportedly named Hailey disappeared with her newborn baby and returned to pay the bills of her delivery and that of another patient named Barbara Jones, without anyone ever laying eyes on the baby again. That weekend, Adanna made her way with Dr. Charles to the chaotic belly of Balogun Market, where the air smelled of burning tuya, fresh Ankara fabric, and a mix of sweat. Hawkers shouted at the top of their voices, while Okada riders waved through the terrifying traffic like stuntmen. As she made her way into the market's heart, she saw a thin, weary woman in a "Jesus is my CEO" apron, arguing with a customer over the price of the place she intended to sell her. The inconsistent wrinkles on her face showed signs of prolonged stress, and the obvious "Japa or Die" tattoo on her wrist was sticking out from her sleeves. This is the same sign that many women who fell victim to the trafficking scandal were seen having on their wrist. Charles confirmed that she is likely the person they are looking for, as he slowly made his way through the crowd to catch up with Adanna. "But she looks ordinary," Adanna commented as they moved closer.
Evil doesn't need monsters. It just needs systems that turn people into ghosts.
he replied with a loud cough. They got close enough to examine before they left the market. However, Adanna had to secretly stalk her for some months to observe and analyze her routines like a case study. 7 p.m. She buys a dodo from Mama Chidi's shop and haggles for it as if her life depends on it. Monthly, pays a visit to Barbara's grave in Ikoyi Cemetery. On one of her visits to the cemetery, it was raining heavily, which allowed Adanna to creep closer to the cemetery, and she overheard her soliloquizing. "I didn't send the money back," she said in tears. Adanna became more worried and confused about everything she had known. It was not just about abandonment. There may be another story that needs to be told, she thought as she returned to her quarters. The next day, the city's sun was punishing Balogun market, turning it into a pressure cooker of sweat, frying akara oil, and the sharp tang of overripe mangoes. It was another work-free day for Adanna, which meant lurking around Mama Nkechi's, once known as Hailey, store. Her sunshade glasses did a great job hiding the eye movement that tracked Hailey's movements. After some time, Adanna heard a crash, and the next thing she saw was a crowd gathering around Hailey, who slumped between rows of her Ankara samples. Everywhere it was echoing, "Somebody help!" without anybody noticing a lady on a soft life, aren't easy tee, and jeans making her way through the crowd. Adanna's manicured hands rolled Hailey onto her back, and this would be their first touch in over 23 years. She hurriedly took her to a bus and rushed her to Emerald Hospital with the assistance of the people around before the incident. After Hailey was resuscitated, her eyes flew open, and it was as if time stopped for her. With a closer look, Adanna saw it, the same sheen dimples on her face, and then one of the rarest irritable spots on her left ear, same as hers. "Your eyes, it's," she said faintly, as nurses and other medical teams rushed to examine her. Behind her, Dr. Charles muttered as he stepped closer to Adanna.
Child, this must have terrified you like a ghost. I am so sorry.
2 weeks later, the emergency unit in Emerald Hospital was in chaos this night as wailing sirens of ambulance rushed. #End medical exploitation protesters, gunshots, and tear gas. Intern doctors can be seen running around with IV bags, and nurses are clearing operating rooms in a rush for emergency surgeries. Dr. Adanna Charles has been attending to patients now for several hours, and her born to heal, forced to hustle scarf was already halfway off her head when another protester was rushed in. She took a closer look and realized it was Hailey, who is now a patient rights activist, the latest victim. Her lip and her left eye were swollen shut. Her hands trembled when she reached for the chart, and she cursed after seeing the treatment indicated for her through a random assessment. As she was wheeled to the emergency ward, the short sleeve of her hospital gown revealed the edge of the tattoo that once drew her attention. Aside from the records, it was something she had never seen. It stated her date of birth. Deep into the gown's pocket, which was half hidden by the sheet, stood scraps of rough dream bank sackcloth. Its frayed edges still hold the scent of over 19 years of market dust and regret. Adanna went close and lifted her gown, probably to check for bruise traces. To her utmost surprise, there were stretch marks and surgical marks that matched the records of the files he had seen in the archives. Hailey grabbed Adanna's hand subconsciously. "Your first cry, it was like that of a bird enjoying the warmth of its mother." Adanna snapped her hand out of her grip and pointed to the savage medical invoice embedded on her thigh with compounded fury. "Care to explain?" The ECG signaled a change in the pattern of the heartbeat as Hailey tried to trace the barcode on the savage medical invoice with her fingers. the exact damn numbers stamped on Adana's orphanage file. "You were never supposed to say this, child," she said with a cracked voice resulting from prolonged exposure to gas. Adana's hand was stretched to the emergency call button threateningly. "And I insist." Hailey motioned for her to sit while she exhaled at the nudging feeling of finally letting out over 23 years' secrets of dream banks. In 2004, I worked as a cleaner in Savage Medical Dialysis Department, and one night I stumbled on them repackaging expired IV lines and fluids for distribution in public clinics. With a dream bank money sack, I smuggled evidence like invoices and photographs I took, but they found out, she explained in one breath. Adana's anger got rekindled. "So you sold me to save yourself?" she asked. The invoice Hailey pulled out from her underwear was already trembling in her grip as her drip flowed in her veins rhythmically. Hailey continued. Savage Medical was not just selling fake and expired drugs. The Japa or Die tattoo on my wrists is evidence of the other darker deals they have done over the years. They were trafficking babies, special ones, and your barcode wasn't for inventory, it was your price tag. Adana readjusted on the edge of the bed when she heard the last part. "And what does that mean?" she asked, confused. "I was told that you were going to be adopted by a foreign doctor, special adoption as it was called. This was because your father rejected you from the first day of your conception, and I was very poor to cater for you," Hailey said as she brushed through the sack that accompanied her to the hospital. "This was the only thing I could get when I ran away without you." The machine's beeping drew other clinicians' attention to the ward. "Why did you leave me behind?" Adana uttered, almost out of words. "My mother was killed, and I couldn't let them do that to you. I needed to save you from them," Hailey replied, its eyes filled with tears. The rest of the story did not come out like a grand revelation as Adana anticipated. Instead, it was spilled out between coffee breaks and the relentless rain downpour, as if the storm was used to wring the truth out of Hailey's bones. "To be honest, I thought some sort of miracle was going to happen at the landfill," Hailey voiced her sincerity. "They told me if I bring my burdens to that place, that money will follow me." Hailey's ECG indications were not okay. Moments later, she took her stethoscope, which had been hanging around her neck all this time, and motioned forward to observe Hailey's cardiac sounds. "Just a mother who the world made desperate." She quoted Dr. Charles's words. Next, she drew diazepam from the medical set close to the bed while her phone recorded the conversation on the other end. Moments before she could administer the drug, Hailey was already gasping for breath, and she could see the signs of a heart attack. Hailey's heart pounded, not from pain, but the guilt of letting go of her blood grace for money. Shock and anger overtook her guard. She wrongly administered a sedative. As Hailey slumped on her, she fired on with the injection without knowing that the syringe was on her thigh. After some seconds, both of them were lying unconscious on the floor. The last thing Adana saw before blacking out was Hailey's Japa or Die tattoo glowing under black light, with her date of birth freshly inked. Their healing journey was transformative. They had a routine that started at 6 a.m. WhatsApp pings of Hailey sending God when Bible verses, usually Psalms 23 with crying emojis, while Adana would reply with surgery room selfies as her tired eyes said, "I am alive." They later arranged monthly meetups where Hailey would prepare Adana's favorite meal, spiced goat meat, vegetable soup, and amala. At first, there was silence, but slowly, between "pass the salt" and "how are you," stories started to flow in. Hailey's hands, which once trembled with guilt, steadied as she dished their meals. Adana also stopped flinching at her touch. One evening of their meetup, Adana decided to slip out a question that had bothered her all these years. "Did you ever try to find me?" she asked between the bites of the tasty amala. Hailey's hand froze in thin air as she turned to Adana with a fraction of a smile. The truth unravels. "I never stopped looking for you," she said with a hushed voice. "I became a patient rights activist because of you," she added. She reached for a handbag from one of the seats and pulled out a notebook filled with addresses, names, and dates. "For over 20 years, I have been tracking down every dream bank trafficking survivor, and this book contains the records I could find," she said as she handed her the book. The truth was that the cleaner lied to her from the beginning. He promised Savage Medical would help her train a child, which was otherwise. The landfill belonged to the Savage Medical CEO himself, a powerful man who could pay his way out of any situation. Further digging into Savage Medical shows that they have mercenaries who are planted in every hospital to monitor and take advantage of vulnerable mothers, just as in the case of the cleaner and Hailey. The massive sum of money Hailey received after the trade was traced to the undocumented cancellation of treatment for dead patients who had already been charged and paid for. The Dream Bank babies were another side hustle hidden under the Savage Medical portfolio. Adana was already frozen in her seat as her anticipated truth came to light in unimaginable ways. But Hailey was not yet done with her story. Hailey took Adana back to the events that played out in 2003, which changed her view of the healthcare system even today. Mrs. Barbara had been in a critical state. She was moved to the intensive care unit, where her breathing and excretory functions were assisted using a ventilator and dialysis, respectively. One night, her oxygen tank was disconnected, and a few minutes later, she was reported dead of hypoxia. The oxygen supply was cut off on the stance of 82,000 naira outstanding debt, which never existed. Hailey brought the receipt of her payment, but their system said otherwise. When she tried to expose the hospital, the public turned against her and she was branded landfill mother. The CEO came out publicly, tagging her attempts as proof that the poor are always reckless. With the truth unfolding in stages, Adana questioned Dr. Charles, who was once a consultant at Savage Medical. On the other hand, Charles sat with sweaty palms as Adana tried to set up her recording devices.
"You see this counseling room?"
Charles pointed at the screen, where a nurse in a too tight Ankara uniform loomed over a thin woman.
"This is where they fry patients like chips."
Staff in that unit are known to manipulate patients into acknowledging taking unnecessary treatment to inflate their bills. Adana's recording devices could see the disappointment in Dr. Charles's face as he explained. He ended with,
"They didn't just steal money, they destroyed destinies."
Armed with recorded evidence and testimonies of various witnesses, Adana went live on social media and exposed the evil that has been going on in Savage Medical. To add to the chaos, Adana flashed her evidence, the barcode on a Dream Bank sack, to Savage Medical's Project Dandilu spreadsheet that reads, "Savage A, asset liquidation, 4.8 million naira. See batch 2 for replication." Amid the saga, the Savage CEO held a philanthropy gala at the landfill where Dream Bank victims were once discarded for trades. This move created an uproar as fingers were pointed at the enforcement officials for having a hand in the atrocity. With the online pressure on the police, the Savage CEO was arrested that same night of his gala celebration. His trial was anticipated and everyone who was affected showed up. Dr. Adana, Dr. Charles, Hailey, and the mothers who lost their children to the ploys of Savage Medical. As the court appearance was going on, an audio of the Savage CEO saying, "Throw them in the dump, you will pick them up from there," went viral on the internet. Then, after weeks of admitting testimonies, it was finally the day for the court to give its verdict. but the USB recording went missing. Hailey did not take the information lightly. She marched into Savage's office complex, dressed in a legendary "Jesus is my CEO" apron, and pulled the ultimate gatekeeper tactics card of "I am here for my pension paycheck" before she stormed into Savage's office. There was no CCTV to replay what went down in that office, but as Hailey emerged, the USB was seen taped to her sweat-slicked back and a fresh black eye from Savage's bodyguard. Mothers fight dirtier than surgeons. She spat through a split lip, dropping the evidence into Adana's hands. With the new evidence, the judge's gavel fell like the final nail in a coffin. Savage Medco's CEO and his blue-suited executives were all sentenced to life imprisonment without bail or further appeals. 1 year later, the landfill, once a medical waste site, has birthed Uprising Hospital, West Africa's first free children's medical center. Dr. Charles now stands tall in a crisp white coat, directing the salvage surgery wing, where he trains young doctors to perform wonders like himself. Hailey volunteers in the cafeteria, serving meals in that same defiant apron, while Adana runs the pediatric wing. Some nights at the rooftop garden, those who fought the battle would stand to watch the sunset over what was once a graveyard, but now a place of healing. Moral of the story: justice, like medicine, works slowly, but it always arrives. Think you know wealth? Think again. Just when you thought you had rich neighborhoods figured out. Plot twist: don't let appearances fool you. Real wealth isn't always what it seems. Loved this deep vibe? Missed our last truth bombs? Here, we exposed the hidden history of how a monstrous fire separated twins, but their comeback was epic. And the next video, it rewrites history. Watch now, before the algorithm buries these two.